There are inherent issues with the way the dance industry is currently run.
How did you end up here?
It's definitely not a path that I would have chosen. Yeah, well, you did a great performance in this show, but at what cost? Your life is a mess.
So, are we setting up everyone for failure?
Nobody's gonna care.
People tend to forget about the people behind the words, and they start really getting so attached to the ideologies.
And that will encourage some people to leave the industry before they even start. How do we just look out for people?
Hey, what's up? It's Joel G here, and I'm very excited to welcome all of you to our launch and very first episode of Maneuver. Our mission on this show is to facilitate meaningful conversations and spread useful information to help dancers maneuver through life and their career. Before we go talk with our first guest, our team here at Maneuver would like to thank the City of Melbourne Council for bringing to life these first few episodes, a 5-part series where we delve into topics in mindset, health, business, and creativity. So if you think these episodes will benefit you, consider subscribing. In this episode, we are talking about healthy mindsets and the narratives we tell ourselves. And I'm very excited to introduce to you our first ever guest. People describe him as a visionary, culture shaper, and strategic world changer. For 15 years, he was the executive director of Candlelight Productions with works in the comedy and fringe festivals. He has worked across disciplines from being a lawyer, a social worker, to being a part of the board of advisors for the Melbourne Magic Festival. He's created engaging projects alongside dancers in the last 2 decades, and in recent years have been the drama director of Melbourne's Lionheart Dance Company. As the chief story shaper of his company, A Stronger Narrative, he helps people gain clarity of purpose, vision, and strategy so they can maximize their impact in their spheres of influence. Everyone, help me welcome Mr. Eugene Wong.
Hey Joel, how are you doing?
Hello, Eugene. It's great to have you here as our guest for our very first episode of Maneuver.
I feel like I need to live up to the bio that you read out. That's incredible.
Well, I'm pretty sure you will, and everyone here will love you. I've seen you in person in some of your talks and seminars, and I truly see your genuine passion in what you do. So I'd like to start with how you got here. I know you've been a professional in many fields, from being a lawyer to a social worker to a theater and performing arts director. From all that you've done, Eugene, how did you end up here and choose this career path of having your own coaching program and helping people have a better understanding of themselves?
I started with a love of the arts. I've been dancing since I was 7, doing music since I was 8, acting since I was 8 as well, I think. So, and that followed all the way through. And then I went through school, and like a good Asian kid, going into the arts is not really a feasible option. And so I was actually quite interested in commerce, and I could sell anything to anyone as a kid. And so I ended up studying commerce, but also studied law at the same time. And towards the end of my degree, did some work experience in a law firm and fell in love with it. It was just really engaging work. And so I ended up coming out of union, and I was lucky enough to get my dream job in my dream firm, and worked in there in the corporate world. But while I was there, September 11 happened, and I was working for one of the big nasties, and they have the big, all of their clients are largely multinationals, and where their clients can be based, well, in the World Trade Center. So we had clients who lost 80% of their staff in one day. It was a pretty traumatic experience, and it was a real wake-up call for us as workers, as humans, to say, actually, something's missing here. And I was thinking about it and saying, you know what? We don't really seem to make anything here. We make lots of money. We're really good at that. But, and I understand that it's really important to have these cogs in the wheel to keep society going. But we weren't making something new, and that was frustrating me. And so I ended up leaving that and going and living with homeless kids and working with homeless kids, and then with young offenders in the high security prison in Victoria. So they're like chalk and cheese, right? But what I found was a lot of the issues that the young offenders and the homeless kids were experiencing and going through were the same issues that people were experiencing in the corporate world. Their behavior was just different. And so, you know, where someone in the corporate world might be desperately trying to earn more money, get their job progression, you know, buy a new house and a fancy car, and get on page 3 of the Financial Review, as so many of our clients would. The young offenders who I was dealing with would just steal the car of a rich person, graffiti on the side of a building owned by them, go for a high-speed car chase, and end up on page 6 of the Herald Sun. So they're exactly the same when you think about it. But we praise one and we ridicule the other, without looking at the sacrifices that get made by some of the people who are working in the corporate world, where their families really take the strain of what they're doing, or the fact that at the core of it, there is this longing for being able to establish yourself as someone who matters, someone who's made a mark on the world. And I found that fascinating to have that revelation that these people at the different ends of the scale are, you know, they're actually pretty much the same. And so from then on, it became a question of, well, how can I explore the human condition, and how can I bring people close together and help them to understand each other? And in order to do that, they need to have a strong sense of not only their own identity, but of how relationships work and how they connect with the rest of the world. And so bit by bit, everything that I've done over the course of my career has actually honed that understanding of the human condition and how we can connect better.
Wow, that's so interesting hearing your story. It's just like what Steve Jobs said. You can't connect the dots looking forwards. You can only connect the dots looking backwards. You've realized that everything you've done in the past now makes sense.
Yeah, it's definitely not a path that I would have chosen if I had seen it going forward from the very beginning.
And Eugene, I love your business name, A Stronger Narrative. It tells me right away what your coaching is fundamentally about, which is the significance of the narrative or the story we tell ourselves, and how that affects how we see the world, how we define success and happiness. And we've all heard the quote, the only thing standing between you and your goal is a bullshit story you keep telling yourself. So to our viewers who are not familiar with this concept of your own narrative, can you please explain what this is and why that's so important?
I think we are made for stories. You know, even from when we're young kids, we are raised on stories, and our brains are actually conditioned to love stories and to want to soak in them. We you know, you start a story and you always want to hear the end of it. It's just the way that we work. So a stronger narrative is a recognition that the lives that we live are in a world that is full of stories. And every day, you know, you will come across several thousand advertisements that will all tell you a story about why you need to buy their product. And if you, at the same time, we have the media telling us all kinds of things about how we should see the world, politicians telling us how we should see the world and ourselves, our friends and our family and our work colleagues. There are all these conflicting stories. And so then that becomes a real risk, because you get confused. You know, oh, it's so confusing. There's too much. What do I follow? And I think it's really valuable to say, okay, in all these stories, at the end of the day, when there are multiple narratives that are flying around, the one that is the strongest, the one that resonates most deeply, is the one that will bypass your head and will go straight to your heart, and then you'll say, I know that that's true. And so it's this idea of in a world where everyone's trying to be louder and everyone's being snazzier, you know, we want to be the next new thing and we want to be an influencer. If you can lock into truths and be truer rather than newer in your industry and in the world, then people say, actually, that is a story I believe in. It's the reason why we go back to the old fairy tales and even Disney movies and stuff like that. They're just remaking all the old ones, right?
Yep.
It's because people really identify well with them.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, I've spent 15 years as the director of a theatre company, and I'm a storyteller by nature. But what I do these days is not about telling stories. It's about helping other people to tell their stories, which is why I'm a story shaper instead. Helping them to understand their story and how they fit into the bigger story of the world. And if you're really well grounded in your story, then that means your identity isn't shaken when there is another conflicting story that comes against you and says, actually, you're nothing because of this. And people with a strong sense of identity end up being able to go into foreign environments or environments where there are lots of confusion, and they can actually bring order because they're steadfast there. They become the sort of people who you want to listen to because they have wisdom beyond knee-jerk reactions.
Yeah, so I want to pull back a little bit because, before we go and conquer the world, we have these voices. And if we pay attention to what we say to ourselves internally, we are often not just unfair, but pretty mean to ourselves. And I know that, as human beings, we have certain psychological biases. And one of them is called the negativity bias. So what is the negativity bias, and why are we often so negative?
I actually think that a lot of it stems from the fact that we are taught to compare ourselves to other people. And so there's a whole lot of stuff that we're told about. Yes, we need to live up to this standard, and we spend our whole lives chasing a standard that we actually can't get to. Whereas if we compare who we are today to who we could be as an individual, I will never be a great golfer. Not only do I not have the sporting prowess to become a golfer, I don't have the patience. I don't see the point. And so if I chase something along the lines of golf, and not only do I not have the prowess, I don't have the passion for it at all. So I will be forever disappointed and discouraged, and forever comparing myself to Greg Norman's scores, and saying, well, I scored higher than him, but that's not the aim of this game. I think, that comparison will always create a negative situation for us.
So where does this story come from? I mean, how do we develop this, and how do we create or reshape it?
I think it's really handy to say, yes, I've spotted this. Where has my value come from? What's the narrative that I'm believing here? Who has spoken that into me? Has it been an ad? Has it been someone in the industry? Often we believe what other people have told us about ourselves, and our own self-esteem ends up being based on that. So within the industry, there's an assumption that you're only as good as your last review.
Yeah.
Or if people don't come to see my show, then that means it's not worth anything. And so my success, or the amount of money that I have, or how beautiful I am, the shape of my body, or my popularity and my following on Twitter or Instagram or something like that. These are what determine my value. We're listening to the wrong story if we're following that. What you're doing is finding your value based on something external to yourself or extrinsic to yourself. We need to learn how to find our value intrinsically, which is, what is your innate value? So if you get hit by a car tomorrow and you're a quadriplegic for the rest of your life and you can't dance and you can't perform, that doesn't mean that you're worth any less as a person. And this is the challenge, because we base so much of our identity on how much we can contribute to the GDP. Yeah. And all these status symbols, and they make life hell. Frankly, Whereas the people for whom their identity is not based on these things, you see that they walk with a freeness. You know, when you know where your value lies, then failure doesn't actually affect your self-esteem in the same way. Yeah, it might be a blow at the time, but your sense of who you are isn't shaken ultimately in the long term. And it brings freedom and joy and peace, I think.
But
So,
you basically sit down and like reflect on what your values are, and you list them on a piece of paper. Is that how it works?
yeah, one of the things that I often help people to do is to discover their why. And Simon Sinek talks a lot about this. He's, you know, a TED Talk person.
Best.
This idea of finding your core reason for being. And the way that I talk about it with a lot of the people that I coach and who I consult for is, okay, we're always thinking about the next project and the next project, and those things are really good. But take a step back for a minute and think, what do you want your life to have counted for? And what do you want to have been the impact of your life a year after you've died, even if no one remembers your name?
Powerful.
And that can be kind of a blow your mind sort of experience of saying, but what do you mean if no one remembers who I am? And you start to realize that the true legacy that you leave is actually based on things that are deeper than stuff that's got your name plastered all over it or your face plastered all over it. And when people dig down into that and they say, actually, I can actually see how what I want to do has purpose, you know, then that provides them with the energy and the drive to keep going and persevere with stuff, even if it doesn't look like they're successful, because they can see that there's still meaning in it. Whereas a lot of the things that we normally get accolades for, you look back and say, in 40 years' time, nobody's going to care. In 5 years' time, no one's going to care. So why am I sacrificing so much of my relationships or my quality of life or my time or my money in doing this when it doesn't matter in the day? So we just need to figure out what our values are for our life. And everyone's got slightly different values, I think, and just chase after them.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy because we almost never hear that messaging in dance programs. But let's talk about that. The performing arts world, specifically the dance world, and the story that revolves around making it. I know for a fact that majority of the messaging in the dance classes and programs is that the meaning of success is becoming either that international choreographer teaching globally or booking big shows as a performer, preferably in Hollywood, or being that big social media dance celebrity. The thing is, we know for a fact that a huge majority will not make it to that definition of success. So are we setting up everyone for failure? And what could be a better approach in our definition to success?
How honest do you want me to be? Because, you know, I may never work in the dance industry again. I think there are inherent issues with the way the dance industry is currently run. I love the dance industry. I love the people in it. I've worked with them for, you know, over a decade, whatever. But there are very few people who ever make it in terms of having, you know, having their name established and working all the time and being comfortable as, like, financially comfortable as a result of their work successes. The reality is that most of the people who enter the dance industry seem to end up being dance teachers who train other people who really want to make it in the dance industry but end up becoming teachers. And so the entire thing is a cycle of teaching. It's not so much of performing. And people don't seem to get told that when they start their career, because that's not a very glamorous way to introduce someone to the industry. It's like, oh yes, you can become me, and you will probably go no further than that, or, you know, you'll get the occasional show here or there. So we set expectations really high, and those expectations very often aren't met. And then in the process of that means that people feel like they're a failure. They always feel like they're a failure. And so there's this sense of constant disappointment and discouragement, right? And that's because the story that we're told when we start, there's truth to it. You know, this is what we want to aim for, but we need to be told the whole story. And the whole story includes things saying, yes, this is what you're aiming for, but how many people actually get there? Let's be realistic about this. So that allows us to weigh up the cost before we even begin. There, you know, even if you make it, you may not earn enough to be comfortable. Are you comfortable with, are you okay with that? And that will encourage some people to leave the industry before they even start. Because I was chatting to someone just the other day about, you know, he was interested in becoming an artist and was told, yes, even if you succeed, you will still struggle financially, most probably. And so he decided to become an actuary instead, and he's working for an insurance company. And it's not his first love, but he's living a stable life, and then he gets to do his first love as a hobby, and so he gets to really enjoy it, and it doesn't tear him to pieces. So for us, I think within the industry, we've got to actually be a bit honest about that, and then that allows people to weigh up for themselves. Okay, what was I really made for? Why do I exist? What's my passion? What's my gifting? Am I actually gifted at dance or performance? Because maybe I really love it, but I'm not gifted at it, and I'm never going to make it. So I need to kind of face that reality now. It's like when Simon Cowell on
America's Got
Talent. You know, Britain's Got Talent or America's Got Talent just says, don't leave your day job. Like, you're rubbish at this. And I used to think, you're cruel to say that. You're shattering someone's dream. But I actually think it's one of the kindest things that he can do, to nip it in the bud early and say, this is not going to be a success for you. I'm going to disappoint you now, but it's going to save you a whole lot more heartbreak further down the line in 10 years when you realize you've just wasted a decade of your life. Chasing after a smoke dream. And so, you know, after making all these sacrifices, for the mere chance of making it in the industry, is it worth it for you? And if you don't want to dance for the sheer love of dancing, then maybe it's not the industry for you. You know, and so thinking through, okay, what will make you truly happy? Do you want to be sustainable as a person? In which case, we actually need to train people in our teaching courses about how to be a bit more sustainable. How, you know, do you care about good friends? Do you care about contributing to the world around you? You know, is being comfortable within yourself on a daily basis important to you? Do you care about being a good person? These are things that we're often not taught in the industry. And, you know, to a certain degree, it's not the job of the industry to teach them. That's part of maturing as a human. But so much of the arts industry is so geared towards churning out a product that we actually put up obstacles for all of these healthy ways of living.
Yeah.
And that's a real issue.
I like that, because there's a couple of things that I want to point out. Is one of my mentors said, you know, instead of just focusing on your passion, also focus on what interests you. So, you know, you might be passionate about dance and you like doing it as a hobby, but something might also interest you in the business world that you can make money from. So you can do both, you know. And also what you said about, you know, telling not just one side of the story, but the full story, you know, that there are options. Because I know some kids don't even at the beginning, when I'm sure when they start dancing, I don't think all of them want to be big. Some of them want to be there because they want to meet friends, you know, but that's not promoted enough. And they start to shift their story because, again, that the stronger narrative there is the teacher's narrative, you know, that you're going to be big one day. So it discourages the other types, the other parts of the story. You know?
Yeah. Some people just do it for fitness, you know, and that's great. But if they only ever hear one story coming from the front, that this is the reason why people come into the industry, then it actually can create an elitism of saying, well, you're only people who want to do hoity-toity arty dance can make it, or, you know, this is only for people who care about excellence above all else. So excellence of final product. Forget about the process behind it.
So is there a better balance to do this? Because, becoming that dance celebrity is a great goal to strive for. And if you have all the elements right, it is possible for you. So how do you find a better balance?
Yeah, I think if you are really well grounded in who you are, and you know that I dance because I have to dance, it's just within me, and this is the passion that drives me every day, then that's great. But if you know that your value is based within you from the very beginning, then you're not trying to prove anything. And that allows you to be free to pursue excellence. And, you do a performance and it's a bad performance and you say, well, I'm disappointed with that performance, but it doesn't say anything about me. It is tomorrow I'll be better. That's okay. And so if you get a bad review, it's, well, that's unfortunate, and maybe there's some truth in that. What can I learn from that? And it helps you to be humble but not shaken by that sort of stuff. And possibly even more importantly, if you get a really good review and you get rapturous applause and standing ovations, it doesn't go to your head, because you say, yeah, I already knew what I was worth.
So true.
And 2,000 people in an audience doesn't actually change my worth at all. And so there were still problems with that performance, and I'm still striving for excellence in the context of it. So you're a lot more steadfast in your approach, because it's you're not on this emotional journey every single day.
Yeah. And is this possible with because I think a lot of it is also from the youth, I mean, they're obviously haven't established their story strong enough yet. But is it possible to have a stronger narrative while you're still young?
Yeah. I was recently speaking to someone who's 20 and has a stronger sense of self than most of my friends who are in their 40s. He's just wise, and he's had good people speaking into him for a lot of his life. And so I find that having mentors, having coaches, having parent figures and really good friends who care about you because you are you, not who care about you because you are cool or successful or anything like that. They're the ones who can speak into you and hold you to account, not only when you're being an idiot, and saying, I love you. And in the context of that, just remember that you are speaking out of line here, or your attitude is not great. But they also hold you to account for the greatness within you when you are getting down on yourself. Because let's face it, as artists, we're constantly beating ourselves up over not being good enough or whatever. And so for someone to say, no, I see you, I know the caliber of what you can do, and you forget that you are really chasing after perfection. Very often our pursuit of excellence ends up going into this really unhealthy zone of perfectionism. Yep. And that just makes you miserable, because it means the best that you can ever do is only just good enough. It's perfect.
Yeah.
But if you get anything less than that, then, I'm a failure. I've let everyone down. I've let myself down. And so to have friends and mentors and people like that who say, no, I see you, and I am calling forth the greatness from within you that I see. They're the ones who keep us going when we want to bury our head in the sand or curl up in a ball in bed and not come out for the day. And they're really important.
Yeah, so a couple of takeaways there is: one, know your values, and number two, surround yourself with great people who are honest and inspire you to reach your dreams. Also, I want to talk about what you said about curling up into a ball, in times like these when we're feeling down, like right now, COVID-19, a very stressful situation to the dance community and basically the entire performing arts community. What have you found effective as a guiding mindset to get through tough times like these?
Really good question, actually. I think having routine is really important. When everything is thrown out, right, and there's confusion, and all of your schedules have been wiped clean, pretty much. it's really easy to lose momentum. And when you lose momentum, physically and then mentally and emotionally and everything shuts down, and you just go, okay, it's all too hard, and so I'm just going to live in denial for a bit. I think it helps to have a routine of saying, I'm still going to get up at this time every day. I'm still going to do whatever exercise I need to do and fitness training so that I stay in this. I recently ran an online practical joke, actually, for dancers, aimed at the mental health of dancers, because they're all stuck at home and they can't dance. And so this whole thing was designed to get people dancing again with a sense of purpose. And so we created a fake purpose for them to dance for. And so even though it was a really dumb reason, people were dancing together, in their individual houses, but then sharing on social media. And so they were staying active. They had a sense of purpose. And so there was meaning to what they were doing during the day. And they were connecting with community because they were posting and commenting on each other's stupid videos. So I'm actually about to release the case study about the thinking behind it. But these things are really important in COVID times, I think, and isolation times, of saying, yeah, I still have purpose. And when everything's thrown out the window, then you end up saying, oh, I don't know what to do. Whereas if you're used to brushing your teeth every morning and doing your hair every morning, you don't think about it. You just crank into it. It's the same as driving a car. The first time they get into a car, you go, I don't know what to do. What's all this? Whereas now you get into the car, you're already speaking on the phone to someone, you don't have to think, I need to do my head checks and I need to look in the side mirror and indicator and things like that, because it's just body memory. So in the same way that you learn the choreography for a show, learn the choreography for your life. Make your bed each morning, get the body memory in there, because that will carry you through some of these more confusing times.
Yeah, that's super true. Like I found, the simple things, like when I wake up and when I'm, sometimes I wake up and I'm just lost and I just think I'm lost and I just basically end up wasting the whole day. But then when there's times when I, focus on my small routines, my morning routine, like I wake up, I know I'm going to get my lemon tea and I'm going to brush my teeth, I'm going to wash my face. And then the day becomes more productive like that. So it's really interesting to, that's such a simple answer almost that people don't think it's a big solution,
Yeah, well, it's totally the way that it goes. It's, one of the things that coaches like to say a lot is, aim for progress, not perfection. And so you say, okay, each day I'm going to chip away at a little thing. So if you know what your values are, if you know what your reason for living is and what your long-term goals are, then that means you can say, by the end of this year, my hope is that I will have done this. And so you know that there are goals to work towards, whether you have work or not. And then you can say, okay, today I'm going to do a little bit of this and a little bit of this and a little bit of this, and that's a success for me today. I've shot one video, or I've choreographed one little thing, or maybe I'll just have read this thing that will help me to manage my finances better, or maybe I'll have watched a performance of someone else on DVD and I'm learning by soaking myself in really good art, that sort of stuff. And yeah, to be able to tick those things off the list, I find really, really satisfying.
Yeah.
So I make lists incessantly, entirely for the purpose of ticking it off and putting a line through it.
Yeah.
And I will often add things to the list after I've done them, just so that I can tick it off and put a line through it. So at the end of the day, I can say, this is what I've done.
Yeah.
And I get to celebrate that at the end of the day and say, okay, today was not a useless day.
Yeah.
And usually at the end of the day, I'll make a list of the things that I want to do the next day, so that when I wake up, I'm already ready to go. I have my direction, I have my purpose.
I want to talk about community next, because I find that many people in the dance world use the word community a lot, but don't really have a full understanding of the full potential and power of it. How is community significant in how it shapes us and our story of ourselves?
I think community is a very loosely used term. Community is where lots of people come together, usually with something in common, and so they flock together for a while, right? Very often when you take away that reason for coming together, then they just dissipate. So a really good example is, you're involved in a show, you come together, you rehearse together, you become best friends, and we're the best, we're the closest that we've been, because you have no one else in your life at that point in time. You're working so intensely on the show. And then you get to closing night and everyone says, oh, I've had such a good time. Like, well, let's keep meeting up and all that sort of stuff. And then, closing night, end of sort of the after party comes, and then you never see people again after that, because they all go and work on different shows. And that's really unfortunate. There's a grief associated with that, because these people mattered, and what you had with these people mattered. And so that's this idea of community. There is another idea, which is communitas. It's a deeper form of community. It's where people come together and they may not have had anything in common with each other, but they have a common goal that they need to achieve together. And so in that, you're going to have friction. You're going to have communication issues, and you have to work through that in order to get a success at the end. And so people end up getting a better understanding of each other. Now, shows can do that because there is a common challenge and people need to get over their differences in order to make this happen. But then we need to find ways of continuing that sense of community after the show. Otherwise, you end up being like a pot plant that gets repotted every 3 months. How are you ever going to dig roots deep down? And so when a storm comes, you don't have any support networks to draw on. Or when difficult times come and there's not much nutrients in the soil, your roots don't go down deep, and so they're not going to be able to suck up much in the way of nutrients. And so it's kind of linked to this idea of, there's the African word Ubuntu. I am because we all are. Everything that you do affects me and affects who I am. And everything that I do affects who you are. And when we start to see each other in that light and say, okay, let's stop having these codependent relationships where my identity is based on what you say or on what you do, but saying, no, as a person, I am my own adult. I'm kind of independent, but I choose to make myself vulnerable with you because I really want this. I want to have this friendship or this relationship with you, and so I'm going to be interdependent with you. I'm still an adult who stands on my own 2 feet, and I'm not relying on you for my self-esteem, but I want to connect with you as another person who is also standing on your own 2 feet. And yeah, we're not taught much about that in the industry. I think it's really important because the shows that we do, they're all about the human condition. At the end of the day, some shows are, beauty for beauty's sake, and they're beautiful. I love watching them. But the whole purpose of art is to inspire deeper meaning in us, to draw out the beauty of the world around us and of life, and to enrich what our experience of the world is. And if we don't know how to do that in our own lives, or if the process that we're going through to make this incredible art is destroying our own lives, then the overall story that the industry or that I as a performer am telling, that overrules the story that's on stage. Like, it kind of drowns out stuff because people say, yeah, well, you did a great performance in this show, but at what cost? Your life is a mess, and we're so distracted by the fact that your life is a mess in real life that we can't even enjoy the show anymore.
True.
And so again, we're talking about narratives there.
Yeah.
You've got the narrative of the story that you're telling on stage, but then there's the narrative of your life as an individual artist, and there's the narrative of the industry. And when people look at the industry and say, actually, this is not a healthy industry, then it shapes the way that they view performances from within that industry. It's not coming from a healthy place. Why would I want to draw from a well that is tainted already?
Yeah.
That sounds harsh, but
I want to talk about responsibilities. For each one of us in the community, what are some of the core responsibilities we have for each other? For example, in the way we educate, operate, and interact with each other.
no, that's a question that's not often asked, actually. I would say first, do no harm. Before we are artists, we're humans.
Yes.
And we need to remember that. There are more important definitions than, oh, I'm a performer. You don't have any obligation or requirement to be nice or extra chummy with other people. But if you care about someone other than yourself, you need to think about the impacts that you're having on other people. And as I said, with interdependence, it's a choice to make yourself vulnerable to other people. And there's a risk that you'll get hurt if you do that. But the benefits are actually way more valuable. And so it becomes an educated risk that you take. You don't want to open yourself up to anyone who's not safe. So choose your people wisely, but connect with them. But it's also an invitation for you to be the sort of person who is safe for other people. And so I think this is one of the things that we need to keep in mind, not only as artists, but as humans in the world. How do we look out for other people? How do we have compassion for other people? And especially in times like coronavirus or Black Lives Matter and all these things, how do we just look out for people? You may not even agree with someone else's viewpoint, but if you can't see someone who's in pain and have compassion for them, then there's something not human about yourself. You've compromised part of your humanity. And then I would suggest that you're probably not a great artist then, because art is ultimately about humans, and how they fit into the world. So the challenge is, how do we make ourselves better humans? How do we, become more balanced, and what can I do to grow my perspectives of the world and not just live in my little social bubble here that Facebook has established for me.
Or dance
yeah.
bubble.
Yeah. And, it is very easy to disappear into the dance bubble where you assume that everybody lives the same sort of life and does the same sorts of shows and things like that. I recently tried to change the algorithms on Facebook and said, and I do this every now and again, I think I'm getting too much of the opinions of people that I really agree with. And so I will specifically go out and click on other people who have vastly different views. And I did it a little too effectively a couple of weeks ago and just got all this abusive stuff on my Facebook wall. It was amazing. I stayed away from Facebook for a bit that week, but it's really useful in balancing our view of the world. And so I think within art circles, it's really easy for us to lose sight of the bigger picture. And that is that, art's meant to connect us. So how do we connect with other people? How do we support each other? How do you support and celebrate someone else's wins? Even though you were going for the very same audition and someone else got it, how do you celebrate them and not resent them for their success? Because if you truly care about someone, even if it costs you something, you're going to be happy for them. And how do you grieve for someone else's losses? They fall flat on their face, whatever. You don't go, oh, that's going to be great for me in the industry. No, that's really sad. I want to see you at your best. And then how do you share the journey? Because it's so much more fun walking alongside other people as you do that. And so I think a lot about planning processes to put humans at the core of everything that we do. And saying, how do we live balanced lives? What are the methods you can put in to treat your people well or to pay your people well, to value the people over the product? to tell the full story to people who are joining the industry and dance classes. And I think it's important that we start to establish things about saying, okay, let's look at the industry and the success rates, and let's look at who we are as humans and what healthy relationships actually look like, and how to look after your own bodies, including financial management, sustainability, sleep patterns, what you eat, all that sort of stuff. I think there are things to think about as people in the dance community, because it will change the quality of life, and I actually think that it will change the level of creativity within the industry as well.
So good. I love that answer. A couple of things there that I really liked is one is the fact that especially nowadays, there's so much raw emotion happening on social media and around the world that people tend to forget about the people behind the words, and they start really getting so attached to the ideologies and the representations, if I'm left or right or center, but then they forget that they're hurting people with their words because they forget, and sometimes like people losing friendships over it. I mean, I don't know, maybe it depends for each person, but I just feel sad when that happens.
I think what's happening there is that people get so gung-ho about an issue that they focus on being right about that issue rather than having right relationship.
So good.
Like there are people who I am friends with who I'm diametrically opposed to some of their views on the world. I do not understand how they came up with that. But I still see the value within them as a human. And I love them and they love me, and that's fine. And we know that never the twain shall meet in terms of this particular issue, and it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Because you like ice cream, I like ice cream. Let's be friends. Okay. Very often having people who don't agree about something makes your life more interesting. It makes conversations more interesting if you know how to fight fair, if you know how to debate a topic and not make it personal.
Yeah.
I just taught on nonviolent communication last week for a local council for community leaders, and it's this whole thing of how do we not point the finger, how do we not cast shame or guilt upon someone else, and how do we not speak out of anger but invite conversation, invite someone into our world. I think we'd be a lot more convincing in the arguments that we press if we actually did that to begin with.
Yeah, and I think we can create a better resolution rather than just being like, oh, I'm right, you're wrong, or you're right, I'm wrong, And I think also, as what you said about the Facebook algorithms and the social media algorithms, I feel that, because that is actually, that's a fact that it's there. I mean, I was listening to the Wolf of Wall Street guy, and he was talking about like how dangerous it can be nowadays because, whatever you click, you're actually attracting the same kind of opinions. And so those what you see is a very small segment. If you're right, you only see right things, and if you're left, you only see left things. And when you encounter each other, you're like, hang on, no, you're not in the same mindset or the same, you don't believe in the same thing, so therefore you're my enemy. But then, but we need these two things. We need the opposition. Governments have different like parties, and they're important to balance everything out.
If you look at what's happening at the moment with coronavirus, there are all these stories about how Scott Morrison is having a big tiff with Dan Andrews in Victoria, and it's the Prime Minister against the Premier, and there's all this animosity. Most people aren't aware that apparently the night that they brought all of the premiers together with the federal government, and they had a big discussion. After the discussion and after everyone went home, apparently Scott Morrison and Dan Andrews sat on the balcony with a drink each and just chatted because they're actually good friends. That doesn't get into the media's narrative, right? Because that doesn't sell newspapers. But I quite like that. Okay, we have very different approaches to this, and in our spheres of authority and our spheres of responsibility, we have to do what we think is right, and we'll go gung-ho for that because we really believe in that. But at the end of the day, we still get to have a drink together and reflect over how the world is as humans, not just as leaders in the political realm. Yeah.
Oh man, I would really love to see a world like that. I can just hang out with everyone while being, still firm with my beliefs.
But it starts with you.
Yes.
And so you can do that as someone in the dance industry, or as the leader of a company, or as someone who lives in your neighborhood. And you can create conversations that invite people in and say at the end of the day, you know, we don't need to get heated about this. And I think very often we are so focused on what differentiates us from other people and how this person is an other in the world, rather than saying, what are all the things we have in common?
Absolutely.
We have so much in common. So
God.
yeah, it makes the world so much more fun, I can tell you. So yeah.
As always, Eugene, every time I come listen to you, I learn so much. So thank you for all that you've shared. One last thing today. What is the one thing that you'd like to encourage everyone in the world to do more of?
Wow. Seek beauty. Seek it in nature. Seek it in the everyday mundane bits of life. Seek it in other people and seek it in yourself. And as you do, there'll be this quiet joy that comes up. And that joy will be your strength in all that you do. It'll help you to be more gracious towards other people and more gracious towards yourself as well, because you see the beauty in them, even when you disagree on an issue. And all of these little moments, snippets of a day that that are beautiful to you will add up over time, and you'll look back on your life and say, it's been a really beautiful life. And I think as we focus on the things that are good, that are excellent, that are uplifting, that comes out, it's almost like it seeps out of our pores like perfume. And people get the aroma of the kindness and the gentleness of the life that you're living. And they say, that is a life that I want to follow. I want to emulate that. And so you don't need to try to be influential. You just need to be yourself in that. And the very essence of who you are becomes inspiring for other people, and they will follow. That's what I spend my life trying to train people in how to do. So,
Man, thanks, Eugene, and thanks for everything you do in this world. It's certainly a better place with you and everything that you do. If people want to connect with you more, and I'm sure they do, how do they connect with you? And what coaching programs do you offer that people can benefit from at A Stronger Narrative?
You want more of me? Well, there are dating apps, and
There you go.
I'm single, I'm available. Or you can check out my website, which is www.astrongernarrative.com, and that talks a little about the coaching and things that I do, or look up A Stronger Narrative on Facebook. And you know, if there are people who've heard this teaching and think that it would be really helpful for them to learn a bit more for their own life and get some coaching for themselves, this is what I do for people. And so if you send me an email via the website and just say, I heard Joel's session, I'm happy to give you like a 20-minute free conversation on the phone just to see whether some of these things are helpful for you. I think a lot of people in the dance industry need it. And, you know, I've worked with dancers for so long and have such a heart for them that I think this would be a really good way to feed into the industry. So feel free to send me an email and ask about it.
Okay, everyone, make sure you check those out and all those resources, because I'm sure that Eugene can give you so much more than the time we have today. Before I leave you guys, here's the question of the day. Comment below on what's one important takeaway that you gained from today's show. And as usual, smash that like button. Thank you for joining us on our very first episode. There's definitely more to come. Remember to always spread joy through your movement, and I'll see you next time.